Hello guys and welcome back for another Aeternum video. The last time I spoke about the importance of the gems, armor types and resistances in order to improve your survivability for both the PvE and the PvP of New World. As this was only one part of the puzzle in the game's mechanic, today we will take a closer look at another system which I personally believe is one of the most important ones in the game. I will try to go into details and also to give you some examples about it, and at the end I will share with you a useful source which you can use for your own good by checking things that you are not sure of. Now, since you are still unaware of what I'm even talking about, let's go further and take a look at the buffs and debuffs in New World Aeternum. I want to quickly remind you that you can support the channel by subscribing to it, as well as joining our lovely Discord community. There you can exchange information or receive the one that you need, and all that will cost you only a single click of a button. Okay, we have probably the biggest pieces of pie from New World's combat system, and those, as I mentioned, are the buffs, the debuffs and the damage over time effects. To summarize it shortly for you, in Aeternum there are a couple of dots also known as damage over time, which are burn, smolder, poison, bleed, and some side effects of different weapons or items which will appear on your bar as red icons, but they are not really considered as debuffs. The burn, together with the smolder, are mostly applied by fire staff users, but also can be found in different perks or rune glass types. The poison is part of the nature damage in the game, and its main source is the bow, but also other origins can be special perks or rune glass types. Bleed is mostly found in the skill trees of weapons such as the sword, the greatsword, bow, rapier and spear, but as well as the other two damage over time effects, it can be found in different perks or heart rune. Then we have the actual debuffs, which are just three, and those are the weaken, rend and disease. Apart from them, we have different status effects such as stun, knockdown, knockback, root and slow, but you will understand why they are separate from each other at a later stage. What we can say about the debuffs of Aeternum is that weaken, as the name suggests, will reduce our damage potential. The rend will be able to remove a percentage from the enemy's armor values, while the last one of them, but definitely not the least important one, is the disease, with the special role of reducing the healing effectiveness on the target hit by it. Knowing about the dots and the debuffs, the last subcategory which we have to mention are the buffs. Here we have again a few in the phase of Empower, Fortification and Haste. Empower, as you might guess, is a direct counter to the Weaken, as it will provide us with more damage potential. Fortification also is a counterpart to the Rend, as it will increase your armor values, and of course the Haste is the buff that provides extra mobility in the form of movement speed. This is the most simple and basic introduction of dots, buffs and debuffs that I can give you, but as I mentioned at the start, I will try to go one step further in order to share with you a bit of extra information. We can leave the dots out of the way, as they are not that core to the gameplay of Aeternum when it comes to the endgame and especially for PvP. Don't quote me wrong here, as they are still a viable source of damage, but I personally believe that the buffs and the debuffs have much more impactful role in the game's mechanic system. The first thing you need to know about the buffs and the debuffs is how they look like and where you can find them. Their icons are always the same, but if the sources are different, you might see a couple of the same looking icons showing all together. The place in which you can see your buffs and debuffs is just above your HP bar, so it would become quite handy if you learn them quickly, as then you will know when the fight will be in your favor. Another thing to mention is that on those same icons on the right side you would notice some arrows pointing upwards or downwards. The more the arrows, the stronger the buff or the debuff is. Of course, at the beginning it would be hard to spot, but with the time and with your experience, you will get used to that. Starting with the buffs, let's take a look at the Empower icon. For me, it looks like a fist with some strange sharp edges on it. This icon will always appear when you have an empowered buff, and you will see multiple times this same icon, of course if you have different sources for it. Small note here is that some sources of buffs or debuffs cannot be applied or stacked together, and only the unique entries will be considered stackable. The next buff on the list is the fortification, and the icon for it is rather easy to remember as it's a simple shield. Again, the same way as the empower icon, the fortification icon can appear more than once on your bar as there can be many sources for it. With the last buff on the list, which is the haste, there is nothing different and the system remains the same. If the haste sources are different, then you would see more icons and then you would have more of that same buff. One important thing to mention here is that the buffs have a cap and they cannot exceed that cap even if more than the necessary sources are applied. The maximum empower that we can reach is 50%, the fortification maximum is 200%, and the haste is currently at 50% but will be reduced down to 40% with the upcoming patch for Season 9. Okay, so quite simple and clear about the buffs, right? They are only 3, we know the icons, we know that they are above our HP bar, and we know that they can stack if applied from different sources. Great! Now let's jump over to the other side and see the debuffs. As mentioned before, they are also just 3. The weaken is the first one that we will take a look at, as it's quite common and also quite nasty, as it can reduce your damage to really low numbers. The logic follows the way of stacking, so here the rules remain the same. You can see more than one weakened debuff as long as it's from a different source. Another crucial debuff on the list is the rend. As we heard previously, this one reduces the armor values of a player, and you can imagine that having a couple of rends all at once might be a recipe for disaster. That's why it's crucial to monitor from time to time not only your HP bar, but also all those debuffs applied on you. The last debuff that we have to mention is the disease. It applies reducing healing effects both from incoming and outgoing heals, so it's quite crucial in fights, especially those against healers. All those debuffs also have a limit and they cannot exceed those limits. For example, the maximum weaken on a target is 50%, the maximum rend is 70%, and the cap for anti-healing effects in the form of disease is 50%. Here I must make a really important note, as this must be known by anyone who is aiming to achieve somewhat good results in the endgame of New World. All of the buffs can be stacked over the cap in order to battle down a potential debuff. In other words, if you have a total of 70% empower, only 50% of them will be applied, as that is the limit for that buff. However, if somebody applies a weaken effect on you with 20%, your empower will not drop down to 30%, but instead it will use that overflow of 20% in order to remain at maximum empower. The same is applicable as well for fortification and rend. At this point you might be wondering about many things and of course how to achieve the best combination of buffs, or how to tackle and reduce the effect of potential debuffs. Well, this is indeed quite an important question and topic, but I will go over it in the next video, as then I will share with you the different perks of the game, their value in the form of being useful, and of course I will give you some tips on how to structure your builds in order to be efficient in fights for as long as possible. In the description below you can find a spreadsheet in which Ayub did an amazing job by putting all the things in the game all together with the amount of buffs, debuffs, dot damages and many other stuff. If you want to use that one, feel free to do so, but also if you have some questions, let me know in the comments or simply ask in the Discord and I will be really happy to answer as much as I can. If the information was useful for you and you've learned something about the buffs and debuffs system of New World, or you simply don't want to miss out the next episode in which we're gonna discuss the perks and their use in the game, make sure to click that subscribe button. It will not cost you anything, but at the same time it will help me and the community to grow even quicker. Now I have to say bye, but it's just for a while. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.